is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy.
Been a long education.
Yeah, you know, it's not cynical. It's common
My
sense.
homework is
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
And welcome to it. It's Wednesday. Wednesday here on the Steve Gruber Show. Glad to have you on board. Big show ahead for you today. Todd Wood's going to be here talking about what's going on with foreign policy and how the death of Antonin Scalia will affect policy here at home. Former U.S. Senator Bob Smith of New Hampshire joining us. He's going to talk about the results in New Hampshire, what's going to happen in South Carolina and Nevada going forward. Dr. John Lott will be here. Of course, the big concern from John Lott and others is, what does this vacancy on the Supreme Court mean? What will it mean? You know, John Lott and I have talked in the past about the tenuous situation in D.C. versus Heller, in the Heller case, where it was put forth clearly that the right to own a firearm is a individual right, not a collective right. You know, like all of the rights in the Bill of Rights, individual rights. They didn't arbitrarily put in one, oh, this is only if you're in a militia. But that's what the left would have you believe. But the left, see, they don't want the Second Amendment. They don't believe in the Second Amendment. They don't believe in liberty for you or me or anybody else. So John Lott and I will take that on today. And Megan Barth will be here. You know, how more salacious scandals involving Slick Willie and the Clintons' personal war on women. We'll take a look at that. Did you hear, speaking of Hillary, and by the way, before we get to Hillary and her comments, is she okay? Now, I'm being serious. Is she okay? Another coughing fit. It's like the third time recently. She can't get her coughing under control. She doesn't. I mean, I've had coughing fits, but it's like once it starts, she can't get it under control. You can't even begin to get it under control at all. And this went on yesterday after her meeting with Al Sharpton, trying to secure the black vote in America. But in the middle of her speech in Harlem, she had coughing fits that could not stop her from, it kept stopping her from, speaking. And so the crowd started chanting, Hillary, Hillary, to provide encouragement, but she struggled to finish the speech, in which she said white Americans need to recognize white privilege and help black Americans overcome seen and unseen barriers to opportunity, and continued to cough as she left the stage. She had similar coughing fits just recently here on the campaign trail. Also happened during last year's Benghazi hearings. And it makes me wonder, is she healthy? Is she healthy? Because looking at her, it certainly doesn't seem that way. All right, Barack Obama stepped out onto the main stage for a press conference yesterday. And, of course, the main conversation was the death of Antonin Scalia and what's going to happen now. And the president, of course, laid down the gauntlet, saying he's going to move forward with a nomination. You know, this despite the fact that Democrats, not Republicans, Democrats, on numerous occasions that I can find, dating all the way back to 1960, and citing the Thurmond Rule, and saying they would block Republicans, including Dwight Eisenhower and George W. Bush and others, from getting any nomination in the final year of their presidency. They're all screaming foul now that the Republicans say, we're not going to confirm a choice for you in the final year of your presidency. Here's part of what the president said, speaking to reporters yesterday.
The Constitution is pretty clear about what is supposed to happen now. When there is a vacancy on the Supreme Court, the President of the United States is to nominate someone. The Senate is to consider that nomination, and either they disapprove of that nominee or that nominee is elevated to the Supreme Court. Historically, this has not been viewed as a question. There's no unwritten law that says that it can only be done on off years. That's not in the constitutional text. I'm amused when I hear people who claim to be strict interpreters of the Constitution suddenly reading into it a whole series of provisions that are not there. There is more than enough time for the Senate to consider in a thoughtful way the record of a nominee that I present and to make a decision. I'm going to present somebody who indisputably is qualified for the seat, and any fair-minded person, even somebody who disagreed with my politics, would say would serve with honor and integrity on the court. I think that we have more than enough time to go through regular order, regular processes. I intend to nominate somebody, to present them to the American people, to present them to the Senate. I expect them to hold hearings. I expect there to be a vote.
As if the American people have a clue. I'm surprised in that bit from Obama that we didn't hear him use the term democracy. Here does this really has become troubling for me. In fact, I find it nauseating that Barack Obama continues to refer to the founders of our nation and their intent, which he did a whole bunch of yesterday, as if he cares what our founders' intent was or what the Constitution says. He's made it clear time and again he's going to work around the Constitution, ignore the rules, do it with a cell phone and a pen. But what really, really bothers me is he continues to refer to our country over and over and over and over as a democracy. In our democracy, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't know squat about this country, and nor do I think he actually wants to. But he continues to pound the message that America is a democracy to further dumb down the voting class. I really believe this. And in fact, I can assure you 90% of the voters have no clue what kind of country they live in and what kind of government we have here in America. Do you? Do you? Because it's kind of important. It's not a democracy. Majority doesn't just rule in America, for if it did, we wouldn't concern ourselves with the civil rights of minorities, potentially. We wouldn't concern ourselves with the rights of women, potentially. Or any other group that isn't being treated fairly. Amish or some small religious sect. We live in a republic, my friends, a representative republic. And it just drives me bananas that he calls it a democracy all the time. Because you go back and listen to what Ronald Reagan said about our republic. Wednesday on the Steve Gruber Show.
Covering Michigan and the world from his bunker below the bridge. Here is Steve Gruber.
I pulled into Nazareth, was feeling about half past dead.
Maybe Hillary and her coughing fits can be tied back to her barking during rallies here the last couple of days. No joke. Hillary took time referring to a commercial that used to run that a dog would bark every time something was said that was not true. Good thing she doesn't have a dog standing next to her, but you just have to hear this. Here's the absurdity of it all. Take it.
Wouldn't it be great if somebody running for office said something, we could have an immediate reaction as to whether it was true or not? Well, we've trained this dog, and the dog If it's not true, he's going to bark. I'm trying to figure out how we can do that with the Republicans. You know, we need to get that dog and follow them around. And every time they say these things, like, oh, you know, the Great Recession was caused by too much regulation. Arf, 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 you know?
You know, I turned on last night. I'm sure you saw it. I'm watching television, and I see her barking like a dog, right? No, she's barking like a dog. And everyone's saying, oh, wasn't that wonderful? Wasn't that wonderful? Isn't that cute? Isn't that great? If I ever did that, I would be ridiculed all over the place. I won't do it. I'm not going to imitate her. But she's barking like a dog, and they're saying wonderful. Trump does it. Believe me, you'd read about it. What's wrong with Trump? So there'll be no barking.
So there will be no barking. Thank you, Donald. I think you do enough barking on your own. And probably should tone it down a little bit. Hey, let's see here. Speaking of campaigns closer to home, John Kasich was still in the state here yesterday. John Kasich polling at 1% in South Carolina. 1%. He, came in second in New Hampshire. He has become the darling of the mainstream media in many ways. Endorsed by the Boston Globe, endorsed by the New York Times. Somebody who the Democrats would like to run against. Well, of course they would. But anyhow, John Kasich was still in town yesterday. Here's part of one of his campaign stops in Livonia, what he had to say. Go.
And one of my buddies was saying, John, you got up every morning for 100 days and you were 1% in the polls. And, and you just kept plugging. And I don't know whether you noticed, we did pretty well in New Hampshire. Those are not going to be done just with one party. I don't know whether you know that or not. If you think that we're going to fix Social Security by the Republicans ramming something through, when you go to bed tonight or when you wake up tomorrow morning, check under your pillow for the tooth fairy. It doesn't work that way. You cannot get it done unless you have everybody work together. It's what Reagan did with Tip O'Neill. Now, if we win the White House, if I win the White House, we're going to have a conservative agenda, and I'm going to be the orchestra leader, but we want everybody to play in the orchestra so we can get these things accomplished. Wait a minute, whoa. This state is going to be very important to me. I'm going to need your help and your votes, and I appreciate you all coming out, and thank you all very much.
There you go. Did that sound like he's, because if you tell people you support John Kasich in certain circles, you get ridiculed, howled at. Oh, he's a rhino. He's not a rhino, boys and girls. Stop moving the marker for what a rhino is. And let's be honest, a rhino at this point would be better than the alternative. And that I do believe. I'm sure I'll get some hate mail on that. Knock yourselves out. Send me all you want. By the way, here's a little something for you as we head down the road to the next series of primaries. South Carolina's first, then Nevada, then Super Tuesday, then, of course, Michigan on March the 8th. You've got all of those things on your radar screen. But ahead of the Nevada Democratic caucuses this weekend, a group of sex workers have decided they have chosen their candidate, and they are now parading around using the name Hookers for Hillary. I can't make this up. Hookers for Hillary. If you didn't see it, which apparently Bill Clinton is all fired up over. He's really pleased with this. He says he probably should vet them all personally. Apparently, he wants to meet them and go over their qualifications for supporting his wife. Hookers for Hillary. Some things are just too unbelievable to make up. Meanwhile, Donald Trump will be participating in a town hall event tonight, moderated by the Morning Joe crew, Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski. Yeah, they're going to be going head-to-head with a CNN town hall meeting that'll feature Ben Carson, Marco Rubio, and Ted Cruz. Trump will be on a CNN town hall meeting the following night. Scarborough had harsh words for CNN last week after the network reported that the Morning Joe hosts were giving favorable treatment to Donald Trump and that MSNBC officials were concerned about the trend. MSNBC also responded by issuing a statement that denied some of those reports put forth by CNN, including that Brzezinski and Scarborough celebrated the New Hampshire primary results with Trump in his hotel room. It should be noted that MSNBC has one show that wins anywhere ever. It's Morning Joe. In January, the show had was 28% more viewership than CNN's New Day show. And thus far in February, that trend continues. So Cuomo on CNN is laying an egg, but Joe Scarborough, Mika Brzezinski continue to grind out the ratings. Not beating, obviously, Fox and Friends, but doing a lot better than CNN, so they're pretty happy about that. There you go. There you go. So, anyhow, that's going to happen tonight. Donald Trump will be on this town hall on MSNBC, hosted by Brzezinski and Scarborough. Meanwhile, over on CNN, it'll be Carson Rubio and Cruz in this town hall format. Be interesting to see who comes out on top on this mess, but lots of places to see the candidates. Although nothing as entertaining as Hillary barking like a dog, let's be honest. Nothing quite that cool, but hey, listen, we're doing the best we can. It's the Steve Gruber Show. If you'd like to join the conversation, please don't bark like a dog, but if you must, call anyway. 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966, the number to call. It's the Steve Gruber Show.
Genuine Michigan common sense on display every day.
You know, still getting responses from some of you folks from the clips from Ronald Reagan I was playing yesterday, clips where he said that we should have an open border, basically, with Mexico, with work visas back and forth, that they would come here, work, Mexican nationals or whomever from whatever country to the south, earn, pay taxes, and then go back home. That it should be open back and forth both ways. Yeah, that got your attention, along with some of the other comments from Ronald Reagan. You see, my point being is that Ronald Reagan, by today's standards, by some of today's Tea Party standards, if you will, would be considered a rhino and would not be conservative enough for many of you in the audience. Consider that. I'm going to put that up on the Steve Gruber Show Facebook page. Make sure you go there, listen to it, and then post your comments, click like along the way. To the hotline we go. Keith on the line this morning. Keith, welcome to the program.
Thank you for taking my call, Steve. There's a lot of different costs being talked about as far as replacing the lead piping in Flint. And I heard some of the specifics about the water line from Port Huron. It's coming in under budget. It was bid out at substantially less money than what people were talking about before the project started. And I would politely suggest that you contact Genesee County Drain Commissioner Jeff Wright, because he was the one that organized all of that, and see what he has to say about what the real cost might be to fix the water system in Flint.
Saving some money along the way. Well, then that'll give Candace Miller even more money to spread around like Santa Claus as she tries to buy her way to the governor's mansion. I appreciate you checking in, Keith. Thank you very much. And I say that Candace Miller suggesting $1 billion for Flint. $1 billion for Flint. Checking down the line, going to Todd Wood now from the Washington Times. Todd Wood here. Todd, welcome back to the program.
Good morning, Steve.
What a difference a week makes, eh? I mean, obviously, there's been a monumental shift in American politics in a week's time with the death of Antonin Scalia. I cannot overstate his importance to the American political scene, since he was the last gift of Ronald Reagan. And thank you, Ronald Reagan, for bringing us that man who actually believed that the words of the Constitution mattered and not what you felt like or thought the policy should be. What an incredible life of service.
Yeah, well, I have to agree. I mean, you can't add much to that. It was a great man, and a lot of people are saying the Republic's going to die because he's gone. I respectfully disagree with that. I would hope that it's bigger than one man, but he was definitely a giant.
Yeah, no question. I wonder, what happens from here. And I don't know how much you've discussed this in your circles, but this notion put forth by the president again yesterday that the Senate's required to hold hearings and confirm. Well, it does say advise and consent. It does not say advise and concede. So, it doesn't say, roll over and play dead. So I suppose the Senate can hold hearings, but they are under no obligation to, seat another justice. There's no timetable for it. There's no specific guidelines. There's no rules. And the Democrats have been the ones that have played fast and loose with the rules, suspending filibusters for federal judges, for example. Going back as far as 1960, you can find examples of them coming after potential nominees from Republican presidents. So I guess they don't like their own medicine.
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm to the point where I can't even listen to Obama on the radio. I just turn it off whenever he comes on. But, obviously he's spinning things for his own benefit. And I hope to God that the Republican Senate will, hold up on this one. We'll see. I mean, I've already heard some people saying, well, maybe we should. And you're right. They don't have any responsibility to do what the president wants. They have the responsibility to consent on the nominee. So
here's something else I heard. Here's something else that I read that I found shocking, and I'm going to get into more in the next couple of days. Do you realize on the United States Supreme Court, there is not a single Protestant? Not a single Protestant in the U.S. Supreme Court. At the time of Antonin Scalia's death, believe it or not, from what I read, he was one of 6 Catholics on the court. The other 3 are Jewish. Not a single Protestant. Of the 9 sitting justices, 4 are from New York City. There's no representation of Indiana or Michigan or Kentucky or Texas. None whatsoever from the middle of the country. They're all from either the East Coast or the West Coast, and they're all Jewish or Catholic, and there it is.
Huh. I did not know that. You got me on that one.
Isn't that crazy? Think about that. That I saw that yesterday. I'm like, that can't be true. Yeah, David Souter apparently was the last Protestant who left in 2010, I believe, to be replaced by Elena Kagan. Was the last Protestant. So so the Christian country has Catholics but no Protestants on the Supreme Court. Nobody, and half of your court comes from New York City. Does that seem appropriate or balanced in any way? To me, it's just shocking.
Well, I mean, obviously, all the New York is nothing if it's not finance and legal. I mean, just listen to Bloomberg and you'll hear that. But the thing that bothers me about the Supreme Court is John Roberts. I mean, we have Bush to thank for that one. I mean, that to me was one of the most, I guess one of the picks that turned out differently than anyone that I can remember.
By the way, I stand corrected. 8 of the justices are from the East or the West, 4 from New York. John Roberts, thank you for pointing it out. He's from Indiana. So there's your representative from the middle. And he hasn't been, there's one notable exception to his, tenure as far as whether he's a conservative or not. That, of course, being the Obamacare rulings. On the other several rulings, though, he has been on the right side of the court with the conservative majority. So has he been a complete disaster? Do you really think so?
I just think that was, as you said, monumental. And I think he's, put the image of the court ahead of really what's best for the country. But, that's a whole other discussion.
There you go. All right, so for the balance of our time here, we'll get started before we hit the break here. But Iran is now attempting to buy T-90 tanks from Russia and other implements of destruction, if you will, from Russia, which is in clear violation of the deal they made with the United Nations. Apparently, Russia is not too concerned about the deal that was made. But isn't that a clear violation of the deal just made with America? They're out trying to buy big implements like tanks, planes, and military planes. How can we overlook this?
Well, this is the deal that just keeps on giving. I mean, obviously, Obama's trying as hard as he can not to notice the big elephant in the room here. Iran has one thing now, and that's money. Russia needs money desperately, and that's a match made in heaven. I've written a lot about that, and it's actually bigger than I thought it was going to be. They're now talking about $8 billion of sophisticated weapons. They're licensing technologies to build the tanks inside of Tehran. The Iranian Air Force commander yesterday said that he would defend Syrian skies against Western planes if need be. So they are definitely spreading their wings in the Middle East along with their Russian allies and Hezbollah and the Syrian government. I mean, it's a mess.
I thought that There was a terrific question during the press conference yesterday, but I'm going to talk to you about that when I get back.
Okay.
So let's take a quick break here. We're with Todd Wood on the program from the Washington Times, talking about the Iranian drive for tanks and other weapons they're not supposed to get at all under the UN agreement. Back in a moment on the Steve Gruber Show.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
Welcome back to it. We're on the line with Todd Wood from the Washington Times this morning. You know, President Obama blindsided by a young reporter. I caught the guy's name maybe as Tolu. The president called him the second or third person he called on yesterday. And I think the president was prepared only for questions about the Supreme Court and filling Antonin Scalia's seat. It was a beautiful question because this guy just looked him right in the eye and said, listen, last year you said that Vladimir Putin, if he went into Syria, would be doing so from a point of weakness. And then he went on to point out that Putin was doing pretty well in his alliance with President Assad. He even had the audacity to tell Obama about the imminent fall of Aleppo to Syrian forces was another blow to the U.S. position and the rebels that we support. The real kicker, though, is when he looked at Obama and says, have you been outfoxed by Vladimir Putin? And Obama then went into a long rambling, dissertation as he does that went from being, he was real kind of jovial at first because he was having fun with the Supreme Court thing to flat-footed. Did you happen to see any of that, Todd?
No, I didn't. Sorry, I didn't.
It was beautiful.
Watch.
It's all right. It was just beautiful because, again, here's a young guy who totally caught the president flat-footed, and he had no response for his positions. And going back to saying how, Vladimir Putin would be from a point of weakness and so forth, the guy cited him, and he could not respond to that because, seriously, how could he respond to that? Saying, I was wrong about ISIS, I was wrong about Putin. He never admits he's wrong about anything, of course.
Well, I am actually more worried about this situation than I have been about anything in a long time. I think that we are headed for some type of, I don't know what the correct word is, conclusion to what is really heading toward kind of a mini World War III already. You've got Russia, Iran, Syria, who are determined to basically support Assad and really poke the eye into Turkey, which is a Sunni state. The Saudis are angry. The Gulf states are angry. Their allies are getting destroyed. Russia's continuing to push and support the Kurds along the Turkey border, and Turkey's shelling into Syria. Saudi's sending airplanes into Turkey to possibly, support those people on the ground. So it's getting really dangerous, and this administration has just created a combustible firestorm that nobody knows really where it's going to end. There's no end in sight.
So am I also reading correctly that Saudi Arabia is also massing troops at the Syrian border? It looks like they could be getting ready to cross that border.
Yeah, so you're going to have American allies fighting this new axis in the Middle East, including NATO forces possibly, which are already involved from across the border. Putin could be trying to break apart NATO by forcing a confrontation with Turkey and to see if Obama will support him. So it could get really dangerous really quick, and I've said all along that Putin is going to try to push this last year Obama's presidency because he knows the next guy is not going to stand for this crap. So he's got another 9 or 10 months to get something done, and it looks like he's trying to do it.
Well, he's trying to, but the volatility, though. So let me, is it possible this thing could trigger at any moment?
Yeah, it is. All it's going to take is, Russia crossing into Syrian airspace again, or Turkey deciding that the Kurds, which are these YPG Kurdish rebel groups, which actually the United States supports as well against ISIS. So you've had this strange situation where these groups are fighting ISIS, obviously taking territory, which, angers the Kurds, and the Kurds is carrying out airstrikes in support of ISIS in actuality, which is a NATO member. So it's a mess, and our lack of leadership. And who are we supporting? We're against ISIS, but what are American interests in the region? We need our president to stand up and say, this is what we want, this is what we're going to do to make it happen, and do it. But he's not, because I think there is an underlying agenda and agreements with Iran and Russia, et cetera, that are playing out that we don't know about.
What do you think those underlying agendas are? You say that, tell me more.
I think Iran and the president have gotten together. I think the president has said, look, we can be your friends. Why, we don't have to support the Jews. Let's make a deal. We'll give you nuclear weapons. And I just think he's not on the side of historical American, values, put it that way.
Well, that would leave us in a pretty dangerous place, obviously. It would put us in a place that, like you say, could trigger a world. It could be a vast regional conflict for sure. And let's be honest,
it already is.
Yeah. And the blowback, of course, then who fires, out of anger or under the cover of darkness, fires on Israel, because somebody
that's the whole other situation is you've got Hezbollah, which said yesterday, I believe, that, we're going to turn our sights back on Israel at some point. Once we've, mopped up the situation in Syria. So it's bad. And
there you have it. So is there any way to diffuse at this point, or has Barack Obama allowed this, and it's not that he has allowed it per se, but he has done nothing to slow the march, if you will. So he's culpable.
What are our policies in the region anymore? I think it was Gates or somebody else who said recently in the last week, there is no American policy in the Middle East. It's completely unrecognizable and indiscernible. So how do you correct that? You have to come out and say, this is what we want to happen. This is America's interest. This is not. This is what we're going to support. This is not. We are going to support NATO no matter what. We are going to support Israel no matter what. But I don't think you'll hear that from this president.
No, I think you're probably right. Go ahead, give folks the place to find your work, threat assessment, and some of the other things you work on a regular basis, Todd. Let folks know where they can find out more.
Thanks, Steve. My column at the Washington Times Behind the Curtain is about to go more prominently on the website and in print once a week, but I also have a section called Threat Assessment on the website, which discusses kind of real-time threats to the country around the world that people should be aware of that they might not be seeing in the mainstream media. And also my website, ltoddwood.com. You can check out my books and columns and articles and everything there. Probably the best place.
Greatly appreciated. Todd Wood, everybody. Todd, thanks to you. Have a good day.
All right, take care, Steve.
There you have it. It's the Steve Gruber Show. I'll be right back.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it off.
Stop.
Got it.
Stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy.
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
And it's Wednesday here on the program. Glad to have you on board. This hour of the program brought to you by the Michigan 529 programs, making sure your kids and grandkids get the education they need. To learn more, go to SaveWithMI529.com. SaveWithMI529.com is the place to be. So who will fall on their sword for Barack Obama? Which jurist in the land is willing to sacrifice their future and their legacy to be nominated for the current vacancy on the United States Supreme Court? Any nominee put forth at this juncture in American history is likely to go down in political flames at the hands of Senate Republicans, hell-bent on blocking Obama from appointing a third justice to the Supreme Court. Republicans may well allow a nominee to make it to hearings, but I find it highly unlikely they will vote to approve that person. This dilemma, of course, was created by the unexpected death of conservative Justice Antonin Scalia over the weekend. No matter what is said by liberals, this is an unprecedented event in American history, and it could turn to be a political bloodbath. both sides getting banged up along the way, but perhaps no one more than the first nominee put forth by President Obama. Democrats will howl that the Senate has the alleged constitutional obligation to confirm whoever the president sends in as his sacrificial lamb. However, the language in the Constitution is pretty damn clear. Advise and consent. It does not read to advise and concede. As I have stated time and again, there are no specifics when it comes to timetables or guidelines in affirming or rejecting a nominee to the Supreme Court. Simply put, the United States Senate has no obligation to do anything at all with a Supreme Court nominee, now or ever. In fact, if Republicans maintain more than 41 seats in the body, they have no constitutional requirement to do anything regarding a nominee. There's a reason we have three separate but equal branches of government. It's called checks and balances. Right now, many would say things are way out of balance, and Republicans have an obligation to right the ship. Many would point to the election of 2014, when the Republicans won across the nation in record fashion to take back the U.S. Senate and set historic levels in the House, all in an effort, many would say, to stop the agenda being put forth by Barack Obama. Make no mistake, these are not ordinary times. President Obama has gone around Congress and the courts on many occasions to plow forward with his agenda, even when it runs blatantly contrary to the will of the people, or more importantly, the Constitution. His executive orders have already been struck down many times by federal courts and also have been struck down by the Supreme Court as unconstitutional. The other raging irritation from this president is his repeated ignorance of what kind of country we actually live in. He calls it a democracy over and over and over. It's not, of course. We live in a constitutional republic. If Obama had ever actually been a constitutional scholar, he would certainly understand this. I understood that when I was, in grade school. During his news conference Tuesday in California, President Obama also shot down the notion he would nominate a moderate candidate. The president bluntly said no when asked if his earlier remarks indicated he would choose a moderate nominee for the high court. No, of course not. Why would he do that? Why would he try to find common ground now? Democrats, meanwhile, will continue to howl about how obstructionist Republicans are being. Well, at this point, I, for one, certainly hope so. The president has made it clear he will make a nomination. Both he and the person put forth for consideration of the high court will have to know, however, it could be the end of the line for that person's legal career. It may well translate into career suicide, in fact. So with the president making his intentions clear, the next question is, who would be willing to be Obama's sacrificial lamb on the bench? I have an answer. I believe Loretta Lynch is the most likely candidate for this job. She is already Attorney General, has already been through the vetting process. And more importantly for Democrats, if she is rejected or worse, not considered at all, it will bury the GOP under a landslide of hateful, racist allegations, none of which are true, but will be bannered about so Democrats can secure minority voters under the banner of Republicans are against people of color, just like now is being done in Flint to Michigan Governor Rick Snyder, despite the fact he had nothing to do with the mistakes involving the water supply, and white towns in this state have more serious lead concerns. The truth just doesn't matter. It's an election year, and this is the Supreme Court hanging in the balance. They will all say and do whatever it takes to win. Period. Lynch, I believe, may be more than happy to take that burden. Her career has already elevated her to the top legal job in America. And how nice would it be? How nice would it be to be the, shall we say, the new Rosa Parks in battling white privilege and prejudice in the 21st century? To the hotline, Bill is on the line in Charlotte. Bill, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Steve. Yeah, I mentioned before that I thought there's a good chance that he would nominate a black woman. I think you're right about Lynch. Hey, I was watching Greta last night on Fox. I about fell out of my chair. She said that she thinks the Republicans should go ahead and approve whoever Obama sends to them, because then the next time a Republican wants to put somebody on the Supreme Court, the Democrats will go along with it.
No, they won't. That's the point.
No, they won't.
No, they absolutely will not. Trust me. If the Republicans played along and said, all right, we'll go with your nominee because next time you'll go with us. No, they absolutely would not. No, see, the Democrats play by the Democrats are played by double standards. You know, and so do I. I'd already considered that. My next column today could be about that. And Bill, you're exactly right. And the reason I say Loretta Lynch, if he puts Loretta Lynch up, she will never be confirmed. That's the whole point. He wouldn't be putting somebody up to get confirmed. He'd be putting somebody up to be martyred. And if you can get a black woman martyred, if you could get a black woman martyred in an election year, then he will use that to help the next candidate on the Democratic side to become president under the guise of all Republicans are racist and hateful of people of color, which is a pile of garbage, as you well know, Bill, but that's the game they play. Thanks for calling in. I've got to run. It is Wednesday here on the program. The hotline number is 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. Let's see. Hans Van Spakovsky is next year on the program to talk about Scalia's loss to the court. I'll ask him what he thinks about Loretta Lynch as a martyr, potentially. We'll be right back. It's Wednesday.
Michigan, born and raised with Midwestern values and Michigan common sense.
So what do you think about the idea of Loretta Lynch taking one for the team, stepping in, taking the nomination, knowing her chance of being seated on the Supreme Court is somewhere near nil? Whoever the president puts up the first time has got to consider the possibility it could be the end of their political career, because it could be a sacrificial role. Somebody they parade out there that gets pounded on, gets rejected by Republicans, so it is able to be used solely as an election year tool. Hans Van Spakovsky here, an authority on a wide range of issues, here to talk about how senators should consider the judicial nominees. Hans, welcome back to the program.
Steve, thanks for having me.
So, all right, so I have this idea, this notion that the president is going to try to find somebody that knows their chance of getting approved to get it through the judicial process is nil. But somebody like Loretta Lynch, a black woman, would then heap onto the Republicans, oh, the Republicans are racist, they hate people of color, and how nice for her to be, if you will, the new Rosa Parks and battling white privilege and prejudice in the 21st century because she was rejected as a black woman from the Supreme Court or something of that nature.
I think you've pegged it exactly right. I think that's what's going to happen. I think the president sees this as a political opportunity, like he does with just about everything he does, and I think they're going to put someone up who they can use in this political race to hit Republicans hard exactly that way and use it to try to win the election.
So how do you position that? There's so much going on. All right, so Hillary is in a dogfight in Nevada now, tied. She's tied apparently in South Carolina. Things not going her way there either. Bernie Sanders, feel the burn. Is taking control. So let's look at all of this. If Hillary's the nominee and Trump is the nominee, let's just go back to that, because there was a time when they said, well, Hillary would beat Trump by 25 points. Yeah, there was a time they said Hillary would beat Bernie by 40 points in New Hampshire, too. Hillary is such a bad candidate for the Democrats. How long do they ride this? Well, I'll just call it the crazy train.
Well, look, no matter what you and I think, and frankly a lot of voters, remember, she and her husband have deep roots into the Democratic Party establishment. And we can see that by the fact that, remember, she got clobbered in New Hampshire, and yet she came out of it with the same number of delegates as Bernie Sanders. Why was that? Because all the super delegates, that's all the Democratic VIPs and officials, they all cast their vote for Hillary Clinton. So,
right. So there's no point of the people going to the polls. But the point of that is millennials, even the uneducated ones that collect themselves at Bernie Sanders rallies, they know when somebody's cheating. They can even figure that out for the most part. And if they think that Hillary's cheating, I think it further erodes support for her around the country.
Oh, listen, I agree with you. I guess what I'm saying, though, is that still might not prevent her from arriving at the Democratic National Convention this coming summer with enough delegates to pull out the nomination, even though if she does, because of what you just mentioned, she will be a very weak candidate for the Democrats.
Yeah, no question. But what if, okay, we live in strange times, Hans. I think that's fair to say. I think that we live in unusual and interesting times, I suppose. What if Bernie Sanders continues to pick up momentum like he is in South Carolina right now? The momentum's all on his side. It would look like he's going to win in Nevada here in a few days. I mean, it looks like Bernie Sanders, they can only rig it for so long. You know, they did the same thing with Obama. They rigged it for a period of time, and at some point you just got to go, well, Hillary's not going to win. What if Bernie becomes the nominee?
Well, I think that is actually a possibility because, as you said, what happened with Obama was that he built up such momentum that he finally started convincing the superdelegates to switch over to him, and that's when he started beating Hillary with delegates. So it's very possible. It's almost impossible to imagine for me a situation in which we have, on the one hand, Donald Trump running for the Republicans and Bernie Sanders, an avowed socialist who spent his honeymoon in the Soviet Union when it was under communist control as the Democratic nominee. It's almost like I mean, what was the movie from the 1960s, The Manchurian Candidate?
Yeah, that's right.
It's almost like that movie.
Well, here's the thing. I've often said it took Jimmy Carter to present the opportunity that got us Ronald Reagan, right?
Right.
But my God, how bad is a presidency that gets us Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders? I mean, how bad of a failure was a presidency that provides the nation with these two to choose from?
Well, you know, I haven't heard anybody else make that observation, and I think that is that actually is a very canny observation because it's very clear that the candidates we are potentially getting are the direct result of Barack Obama, and boy, that is. Could history be more critical of the president than that?
Well, and that's my point. Now, see, you cost me time. Now I have to go write this column. You know, I did the same thing yesterday, and I got to go write a column about this because I think that's. I mean, seriously, I often thought for many years Jimmy Carter was such a failure. He gave us Ronald Reagan, thank God. But I had this notion that Obama was so bad that we would get some sort of a wonderful conservative to come along and prop us back up for another generation. But unfortunately, his failures have been so extensive that even his own parties, isn't it interesting? They're out on the campaign trail talking about how bad things are, the Democrats. Well, I thought this guy was great. I'll give you 20 seconds for the last word.
All I can say is this is the most confused election that I could remember in my entire life. And for once, I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen.
And people actually wonder why I drink. Hans, always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Hans Van Spakovsky right here. Authority on a wide range of issues. Great guest. Good fun. I mean, is Obama so horribly bad and so horribly failed that this is what we get, Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump? Good God. Cocktail, please.
Taking a closer look at the stories that affect you most with a big dose of common sense.
I want to live, I want to give. I've been a miner for a heart of gold. It's these expressions I never give that keep me searching for a heart of gold.
All right, welcome back to it. It's 33 after the hour. Ronald Reagan was the first president I voted for. Yes, and I have thought for years it took the failed presidency of Jimmy Carter to give us the opportunity for President Reagan. You know, and like I was just mentioning here a minute ago, I have been hopeful over the past couple of years that Obama's time in office, and 2014 being the bellwether most recently of Obama's time in office, would yield another principled conservative ascension to the Oval Office. However, as I was just saying, more recently I've begun to conclude that Obama's failure of leadership, both home and abroad, has been so complete and so disastrous that it instead of giving us a principled conservative, it has led us to Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, because people are so overwhelmed and angry and fed up, frankly. And that's on both sides. I mean, what kind of failures have triggered on both sides? The left feels that Obama has let them down by not going far enough into the big nanny state, into welfare and programs and problems, but something everybody can agree on. And you hear Sanders and you hear Clinton on the campaign trail saying this: we can do better, we can fix these problems. Well, what problems could there be? I thought we were in utopia here with Barack Obama. And yet you hear Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders on the campaign trail bemoaning the problems with the economy. What problems with the economy, I must ask? You tell us that the unemployment rate is 4.9%, and the stock market is growing and everything is doing swimmingly well. And yet the Democrats are out there bemoaning the economy and the problems we face. Well, the truth being that the unemployment rate's really 10%, not 4.9%. Any thinking person can figure that out when you have 95 million Americans that are able-bodied Americans, adults, not participating in the workforce at all. You're smart enough to know that the unemployment rate is certainly higher than 4.9%. When you have close to 50 million of us, of our neighbors, of our countrymen here, on food stamps, you can certainly figure out the economy is not everything the president is trying to tell you that it is. When you look at our military, and you look at the fact that we have no respect on the world stage for our military or for John Kerry and our ambassadors, that America's word means little or nothing to our allies. When you look at the failure of Barack Obama to capitalize and turn Afghanistan into a big win, like Joe Biden said he would back in 2011, that it would be a big success story for Barack Obama, and now that has failed. You look at the VA. Was anybody ever fired at the VA? When veterans of this nation were dying because they couldn't get health care? Remember when Bernie Sanders expressed outrage that the nation's debt was $6 trillion and that going to war and spending more money was a horrible idea? Do you remember when Barack Obama on the campaign trail in 2007 and 2008 said that being $6 or $7 trillion in debt was unpatriotic? It was un-American, he said. Of course, he didn't mean any of that. He was just trying to get elected. He cares little about America or our traditions or who we are or what kind of a nation we are. He doesn't even know. He thinks we're a democracy where the mob rules. But isn't it interesting that his failure of leadership, both home and abroad, has been so complete and so disastrous that instead of giving us a new Ronald Reagan, he has led us to Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. That should just speak volumes. That really should speak volumes about where we are and what is continuing to go wrong. And yet, the shrill people in his corner will demand that he gets a chance to appoint another Supreme Court justice. He's appointed two. And good for him. He has appointed 2. And what would be the concern anyway for the Democrats? They believe that Hillary Clinton's going to, dance into the White House, or Bernie Sanders, a guy who's not even a Democrat, by the way, but he might get the nomination, despite the fact that socialism is a failure 100% of the time, actual socialism. The other interesting thing about all of this is that the supporters of Bernie Sanders and others can't even define socialism properly. You're dancing down the street with all the other rats behind the guy with the flute, and you don't even know what it is. You're just dancing along. All the rats are getting charmed out of the sewer by the guy playing the flute, promising you all sorts of things that he cannot deliver on because it's economically impossible. Meanwhile, if we don't clean up our act financially, in 10 years or less, let this sink in, if I haven't gotten your attention yet. In 10 years or less, if we don't address the debt in America and stop piling on and start to reverse the debt that we already have, in less than 10 years, the third biggest item on the federal budget will be paying the interest, not the principal, just the interest on that debt. I used to chuckle at the idea, at the notion of getting a giant house, because he used to offer these jumbo mortgages, interest-only mortgages. Well, how is that any different than just paying rent? If you have an interest-only mortgage, you never pay down, it never goes away. It's permanently there. The problem being is when you have a downturn in the economy, which is inevitable. It happens every so often. And interest rates go up. And income goes down. That's when you go bankrupt. And that is the place we have been led. More than, and I correct myself, I've been saying $18.5 trillion in debt. The debt clock now says we're just over $19 trillion in debt. Update, we're in worse shape than I thought previously. So the failures of Barack Obama have delivered to America Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. For if Barack Obama were good, if Barack Obama had had a successful presidency, Hillary Clinton would be walking away with this thing. Instead, we have the peasants and the pitchforks cheering for Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump pounding on the desk saying we can do better and we're done getting screwed. Consider that for the rest of the day. It's the Steve Gruber Show.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control.
45 after on this Wednesday. A consequential week, to say the least. Our next guest, Dr. John Lott, the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. Doctor, welcome back to the program.
Great to talk to you.
I'm going to guess that your reaction when you saw it come across your phone that Antonin Scalia had died was similar to millions of us who felt a sinking in the pit of our stomach.
Yeah, I know, it was pretty horrible. I mean, I've only met him like once personally, but obviously he's been a stalwart. He's been a brilliant man who's had a huge impact on the direction of the country through the courts there, and it's a real loss.
So where do we go from here? I mean, if we had talked, you and I have talked about this on numerous occasions, the Heller case, for one, a 5-4 decision that made clear that the right to keep and bear arms was a individual right, which Of course, it's an individual right. Every right in the Bill of Rights is an individual right, except that the Democrats, the left, have some notion that somehow everything's an individual right, except for this one is somehow a collective right, or it shouldn't even exist at all. But how tenuous do you believe the Heller case is? Will justices go back and reverse that? Will people like Kagan and Ginsburg, who, obviously did not side with Scalia on that, will they go back and reverse the majority decision on that?
Well, you had the decision in the McDonald case, which applied what had happened in Heller to the rest of the United States. And in the dissent there, you had four liberal justices say that they would overturn the Heller decision if they had a chance. So, you're just one justice away from giving them a 5-vote majority to be able to go and do that.
What would happen if Heller were overturned?
Well, you would make it possible again so that governments could ban guns, could ban all guns. Right now, the Heller decision is actually a very narrow decision. It says that a government cannot ban entirely an entire class of guns. So they can't ban all handguns, or they can't ban all rifles. It's still possible for them to ban many different types of handguns, but if Heller was overturned, then they could go back and say, okay, well, we're going to ban all handguns. And I think that would be something that at least some local governments would try to do. And, in the long run, you'd have even more. You look right now and you can see California or New York make it more and more difficult for people in those places to own guns. They impose fees, taxes. They have regulations that make it extremely difficult for people law-abiding citizens to own guns legally. And I think it'd just be off to the races for at least some places to make it official that they just want to ban them.
How would that play? And we're on the line with Dr. John Lott, sorting out the possibilities going forward, if not likelihood, that the Second Amendment will be a thing of the past, in large part, if there is another liberal justice put on the Supreme Court. What about concealed carry in all of the states, like Michigan, where I am, and you have 500,000 concealed carry permittees in this state and across the country? That would put wouldn't it possibly put the federal government at odds with states across the country? And what if the states say, you know what? We're just not going to do it. We're just not going to enforce those laws. We've heard sheriffs do it. County sheriffs say, we're not going to enforce laws that are unconstitutional. A lot of them. Constitutional Sheriff's Association. It sets up...
Well, there's going to be some sheriffs in some places. Sheriffs are elected. Well, they'll stand up and resist that. But in a state like California, there's a court case right now over whether or not they can be extremely restrictive on issuing permits. You have places like San Francisco County, which in some years has 0 permits that are issued. Can they do that? Well, the outcome of that case is going to depend on who gets this position that was Scalia's. In fact, even if Scalia was there, you could still lose that case, because all you have before is a 5-4 decision saying that a complete ban goes too far. That doesn't mean you're going to get all 5 of the people who voted against a complete ban are going to go and vote for people to be able to carry permanent concealed handguns. You're going to need to pick up a couple votes in order to go and win something like that for sure. I'm not saying you'll lose it for sure, but I wouldn't bet the farm on winning that case. So, but that's even if you got another Scalia in to replace the man who just died. But without him, I guarantee you'll lose.
For the Heller decision to be overturned, a case would have to be brought to the Supreme Court, but that wouldn't take very long, would it?
No, because you have local jurisdictions. Washington, D.C., for example, would probably pass a ban tomorrow if they had a chance.
Right.
And so they would just see, well, they can read who's on the Supreme Court as well as you and I can.
Right.
And so they pass a ban and say, fine, take it to the Supreme Court. And they'd believe that they'd win at that point. And so everything would be overturned.
Dr. John Lott, I wish we had more time. Ominous times, to say the least. You can find out more at crimeresearch.org. Crimeresearch.org. How important is your liberty to you? Dr. John Lott, always a pleasure.
Great talking to you.
Thank you.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Education.
Yeah, you know, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
All right, my friends, it's Wednesday, and welcome to it. I'm working on a brand new website. Ivy and I are working on a brand new website to, bring you more. Make it easier to find the columns and the posts that I make every day. Make your podcasting adventures easier, more fun, and more fulfilling, of course. Because I want nothing more than your podcast adventure to be fun and fulfilling. Trust me, it keeps me awake at night. It'll also be the place where you can listen live to the program. We're going to have some video stuff going on there. You can learn about the radio program. You can learn about the stuff that I do in television as well. Going on some of our hunting adventures. You know, I guess that's one of the things that I found interesting about Antonin Scalia. I didn't realize that he was such an avid bird hunter. Reminded me much of my father. I was raised by a man who worked for Dow Chemical for years and years, graduated from Michigan State University in Fisheries and Wildlife, and knew more about the natural world than anybody I've ever known before or since. My father died about 10 years ago. But his vast knowledge of bird hunting, and one of his little quizzes, he would ask people, can you name the 28 species of game birds in North America? And I would look at him and say, no, frankly, I can't. But I bet Antonin Scalia could have done that. He was hunting blue quail at the time of his death in Texas. Blue quail, one of several quail species. And I've hunted blue quail once or twice. Fast little buggers and hard to catch up with, but very entertaining. So I found it interesting that Scalia was an avid bird hunter like that. I did some more research on a comment, speaking of the Supreme Court from earlier. There is not a single Protestant on the Supreme Court, even though Protestants make up about 26% of the American population. In fact, overall, Christians make up about 71% of the American population. Because if you include Catholics at 21% and other Christian denominations, you get to 71%. At any rate, the Supreme Court, when Scalia died, had 6 Catholics and 3 Jews. For real. 4 of the 9 were from New York City. 4 of the 9 justices on the United States Supreme Court are from New York City. Chief Justice John Roberts is from Indiana. The rest are either from New York City or the East or West Coast. There is no real representation of the rest of the country. Not Texas or the real American West, and I don't count California, but, Montana, the Dakotas, Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, no representation whatsoever. No representation except for John Roberts of the Midwest. No representation of the South anywhere. Or the Southeast, no Florida, no Georgia, No Carolinas. Doesn't that seem a bit much to you? Maybe the president could consider elevating somebody that didn't go to Harvard. Every single one of these people has touched Harvard. Harvard and Yale. The only exception being that Ruth Bader Ginsburg ended up graduating from Columbia because after starting Harvard, she finished at Columbia, my understanding. The Supreme Court is a very narrow group of people, apparently. Very narrow group of people. My question going forward is, who is Donald Trump going to pick as his sacrificial lamb? And the reason I bring this to your attention and talking about the new website and so forth, I want to be able to give you more resources. I want to make it bigger and better and more bad. Hey, you fill it in. More bad. You got it. Because we want to be a resource for you and looking for video and so forth. And I guess that's what got me down the Scalia trail of bird hunting and so forth. You can talk about the television programs I do, which are hunting and fishing programs. Ivy and I do those on a very regular basis. I've been producing shows for the Outdoor Channel and hosting them since 1994. So a long time. I was young once and thin. It was a long time ago. But we want to make this website. The website will have video available. It'll have the columns that I write. So for today, for example, you'd be able to read Obama's sacrificial justice, which I believe he's going to martyr somebody. Somebody, let's be honest, whoever he puts up has a slim chance of ever being confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Slim chance. So what is his best political move? Probably to put up a black woman, maybe like Loretta Lynch, who's already been completely vetted by the U.S. Senate. So politically speaking, the president and his Democratic colleagues and axemen like Harry Reid could eviscerate the Republicans saying, you're racist. You're only blocking her because you're racist. Of course, they'll forget about the fact that Clarence Thomas was nominated by a Republican and has been ridiculed by the left for years. Of course, that's not racist. That's different. He's an Uncle Tom, so it's all right. See where I'm going with that? Mm-hmm. Anyhow, so the president will put up a black woman, I believe, is a strong possibility. Loretta Lynch, a strong possibility because she's already the attorney general. It's not going to affect her career going forward. It's not going to damage her. And she might be the one willing to fall on her own sword at the request of the president to put herself into that position to make it an election year issue, crying foul. Oh, my God, Republicans hate black people, which is garbage and nonsense. But they'll use that to parade it around. And let's be honest. Many of these young voters, when you ask them about who they're voting for and why, they can't explain it. They can't explain what democratic socialism is. They cannot give you one example of what Hillary Clinton has accomplished in her lifetime of political service, as they say. They can't give you one example. So when they're told, well, the Republicans hate black people and they're blocking Loretta Lynch only because she's black, not because she's ideologically out of phase with most of America, they wouldn't tell you that. They wouldn't tell you that this is still a right-of-center country, which it is. And that elevating Loretta Lynch to the bench would mean the end of the Second Amendment, would mean an expanse of affirmative action, would mean, in effect, open borders in the southern United States. All of these things that many people, in fact, the majority of Americans, do not support. But the majority of Americans would tell you America is a democracy. The mob rules. Because they simply don't understand it's a constitutional republic. Because most Americans are, frankly, not well educated on, well, they don't know much at all about much of anything, frankly. I mean, ask some people some simple questions. Ask somebody under 30 a few simple questions about politics or current events. Good luck with that. Wednesday on the Steve Gruber Show.
Getting your day started with news from around the state and around the world. Common Sense Radio. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
All right. right, let's get to some facts. Let's try to dig some facts out of this and get past the political rhetoric. You know, you're hearing all sorts of things of, constitutional requirements and obligations and this and that from Barack Obama in putting forth a nominee. Well, what is the truth? We're going to talk to Richard Friedman. He's a professor of law at the University of Michigan and has a lot of experience with U.S. Supreme Court history. Professor, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
Well, all right, let's start with this. I mean, hearing from the president yesterday during his news conference, you would think that the Supreme Court being short one justice would be, earth-shattering. The end of the court as we know it, our country could hang in the balance, which, come on. It seems a little extreme to me.
It's not earth-shattering. It does mean that some decisions will be delayed. For the most part, most of those decisions, if they're not made now, they could be made later. It would only be decisions in which the court deadlocks 4-4. But there are some of those. One of those is over the president's power over immigration, which it appeared that maybe they were 5-4 against him. Now, more likely 4-4. So that it could cause a significant delay there. But I don't regard it as a constitutional crisis. I regard it as a serious political issue.
I consider it as politics as usual. I mean, we do have three separate...
I'd say sort of politics is unusual because it's just a very rare situation.
That part's rare, but as far as the infighting and the finger-pointing and the posturing and the pontificating, that's politics as usual. You're right. So it is an unprecedented event, despite the Democrats trying to say, well, this has happened before with Kennedy. That's not a fair comparison. Bork was given the push out the door, and then Ginsburg was given a push out the door.
Yeah.
And then,
I agree. It's not the same situation.
Not
it
at
is a long time to let a nomination go, and I suspect that if things were reversed, the Democrats would take a very similar attitude. I suspect.
Well, no question.
I think ultimately it's a matter of how much heat the Senate Republicans want to take, and Senator Grassley's statement yesterday, and also a statement by Senator Tillis, suggested that they're getting a good deal of heat from the absolute stonewall that Senator McConnell put out. Saying we're just not going to do anything. I think Grassley and Tillis are suggesting maybe we better take a somewhat more moderate line. At least look at the nominee.
Well, here's the thing. What is the requirement of the U.S. Senate to, when it says advise and consent, it does not say advise and concede, that's for sure. But it says advise and consent. There's no timetable. There are no other parameters on it. So if it took them, they could leave a seat open on infinitum for years, couldn't they?
Well, they could. I mean, at some point, though, you say, well, they're just not doing their job. If the Senate said, fine, nothing says we have to stay in session, so we're going to convene and just go home, they'd rightly be criticized for not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Well, you said rightfully. Hold on.
They pay a political cost if they appear to be obstructive and just not doing their job.
Professor, I'm going to take exception to you say rightfully being accused of not doing their job. My understanding is there are three co-equal branches of government, right? And if the Senate,
usual rhetoric, I prefer to think that each branch has its job.
Fair enough.
And you're right. The Senate is not supposed to be a pushover.
That's correct. And if the Senate decides that their way to protect the country from an overzealous executive or somebody that's taking the country too far in one direction, their job would be to prevent that. That's why we have co-equal branches of government, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I think that to do their job right, what they should do, I think what they should do is look at the particular nominee and decide whether that nominee is whether it's appropriate to confirm that nominee. This is not an area where absolutes work, because the argument that you're making, you could equally make if it were a year and a half or 2 years or 3 years before the term ends. And at some point, I think most people would say, well, that's not right. I mean, if instead of being 2016, it were February 2013, and the Senate said, we're just not going to consider any nominee that this president puts forward, I think most people would say that's not operating the system as meant to be.
Well, that's what the Democrats said in the summer of 2007. We can belabor the point.
Well,
that's
what I say. I don't think that this is just a Republican thing.
No, I understand that.
I think it's a matter on either side of how much political heat they're willing to take.
That's right.
For not moving forward.
But they are not required. They're not required by anything in the Constitution to do anything now or ever.
No,
you can argue they should or they shouldn't, but they're not required to. So we could talk about that. But let me ask you something else, because here's, I think, what the political play might be from the president, which is to put up a candidate, most likely a black woman like Loretta Lynch, that is not going to get traction. And so then it becomes a bigger political football. Look, Republicans hate people of color, or whatever the play might be. And so would the president put somebody up that's not going to get confirmed to martyr that person in an election year to create a bigger political issue?
Well, that would be one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it would be if you put up Loretta Lynch. I think she's a qualified candidate. I think most people would consider that she is a qualified candidate, whatever one thinks of the ideology. The president is entitled to say, I'm the president of the United States until noon on January 20th, and I have the power to nominate, as has been done from the time of John Adams, on the eve of going out of office. He appointed John Marshall when he's a lame duck. I have the power, and I'm going to hope that the Senate does what I think is the appropriate thing. Being fully aware that the Senate would be unlikely to, but then says, well, if the Senate doesn't want to, they absorb the political cost. And from Ms. Lynch's point of view, if she's not confirmed and a Democrat is elected, then maybe she's the most likely nominee. So, I don't think it would be a shame if he did that. I think he'd be perfectly entitled to do something like that, even if he had very little hope of for being confirmed.
Professor, thank you so much. Richard Friedman from the University of Michigan. Back in a moment on the Steve Gruber Show.
Genuine Michigan common sense on display every day.
Ice, ice, baby. Ice, ice, baby. All right, stop. Collaborate and listen.
All right, welcome back to it. It's 33 after on this Wednesday. Man, I got you guys fired up this week. You guys are writing some good letters. Mike and Barb, you wrote a good letter here. I'm going through it. Don't worry. I realize that we put the hippies in charge of educating our kids, after the 60s. That's probably a bit of a mistake. Just saying. My next guest, whose hair is almost as long as some of those hippies, Megan Barth, founder and proprietor of ReaganBaby.com, here back on the show. Megan, welcome back to the circus.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to be back. I don't wear patchouli.
Come on, be serious.
I don't.
Are you sober? I'm just joking. Hey,
never.
It's hey, so here's the deal. Bill Clinton is a defender of women's rights. I understand, but and I love that Bill Clinton is the guy out there to defend women's rights, because those Republicans are Republicans mistreat women. Thank God we've got somebody like Bill Clinton to stand up for people. Am I wrong?
Yeah, he's for women's rights as long as we're right on our knees.
Yeah. So this former Miss Arkansas, Sally Miller, first of all, she says Bill was so in bed. And she says a lot of, which it probably hurts his feelings, but the one-time Miss America finalist has come out with another whole series of saying, this is Bill, this is what he did, here's what I know, here's the pillow talk. At some point, doesn't this totality of evidence pile up? I mean, Bill Cosby, for God's sake, has been convicted in the court of public opinion, and yet Bill Clinton's resume seems to be quite a bit more, I won't say longer, more significant. And yet Bill Clinton continues to get a pass by the very people that villainize Bill Cosby. Please explain.
Well, I wish I could, but, with Democrats, morals and ethics really kind of go out the door when it comes to the party. They are collectivists in thought. Anybody but a Republican is the motto for Democrats. And let's just call them socialists, shall we? Because the current Democrat Party has nothing to do, nor is remotely close to the party of my parents or the party of Kennedy. This party has morphed into Marx with the help of Barack Obama. So it doesn't matter how many transgressions, rapes, assaults, harassments that Bill Clinton has had in the past or has been alleged to have had in the past. It doesn't matter if Bill Clinton took 18 trips with a convicted pedophile down to an island called Orgy Island, whereby young underage girls were used as sex slaves.
Yep.
That all goes by the wayside because it's Hillary Clinton. She's the champion. She's here to save everybody, including blacks, who now she was on the stump with Al Sharpton yesterday, the biggest race pimp out there, claiming that there is systemic racism that she's been fighting against her whole entire life, and only she is going to be the one to equal the playing field and eliminate systemic racism.
Hold on.
Sorry, she did not realize that her socialist comrade, Bernie Sanders, is appealing to this demographic in large numbers. If you look at his rally at Morehouse College yesterday, he is chipping away at this demographic that the Democrats have coveted, which is the African-American vote, for so long.
Yeah, I'm still stuck on Sex Island.
Orgy Island.
Whichever. Orgy, whatever. It wasn't the governor of South Carolina, I think his name was maybe Mark Sanford, and he went to South America and had a consensual affair with some woman from South America somewhere and was run out of the governor's office because, there was a horrible thing that he had done. And yet again, we come back to Bill Clinton, who can go to Orgy Island or wherever, or there can be 25 women or more that say, here's the pattern. And they talk about Bill Cosby. Here's the pattern. It's the same. Here's Bill Clinton. The pattern is the same, whether it's biting the poor women's lips, making them bleed, and so on and so forth. So I'm still hung up there. And yes, go on.
Well, look at Gary Hart, if you want to go back in history. Look at Anthony Weiner. Anthony Weiner.
Well, we all did.
And then you have Elliot Spitzer,
Good
who
Lord.
was just accused of choking a Russian prostitute at the Plaza Hotel in New York.
Conveniently, though, she has now left the country, so so Elliot Spitzer. Yeah, so you've got all of these pigs, and Anthony's Wiener was broadcast all over the world, for God's sake. Mm-hmm. And that's just, it's reprehensible, the double standards. But the sad thing, Megan, is this, and it's reinforced every time I hear Barack Obama talk, like yesterday during his press conference. The electorate is so uneducated, they don't know. They just believe whatever they're spoon-fed, it doesn't matter. Here's Barack Obama again using, in our democracy, I scream at the TV. Ivy comes in, are you all right? Do you need some medication? I'm sick of him calling it a democracy. The mob rules here? It's a republic, genius. But you're a constitutional scholar. Of course, you still don't know that it's a republic. It infuriates me how dumb the voters are. The voting class is so, illiterate, frankly.
Well, and thank you to our public education system. And you had mentioned that in the lead-in about having hippies educate our children on all the great benefits of socialism. And this is why you see the millennials rallying behind a socialist by the name of Bernie Sanders. Hillary Clinton only does really well with 55 and up. All of the young millennials are flocking to Bernie because this 74-year-old guy is all of a sudden hip because socialism is in vogue.
Yeah.
So Hillary's campaigning like Bernie Sanders II. She's moved her platform so far left.
She's in real trouble.
She's now talking about considering reparations.
Yeah, she's in real trouble.
Even though she hasn't endorsed it, there's reparations on the table that the far left keeps talking about in order to equalize income inequality and also to pay for the injustices of imperialist America against African Americans and the Indians.
So who would pay these reparations? Who would pay these reparations? People like you and I who never owned another human being, paying people that have never been owned by another human being, and generations ago, and most of us, many of us are of mixed race and so forth. So if you're making reparations payments to somebody who's half black and half white, aren't you also making reparations to the slave owners themselves? I mean, it's a bit confusing and frankly ridiculous to go down that road.
Well, right. It's just all hyperbole, just to further the divide and the wedge between the various races and ethnicities of Americans. Because again, we're not all Americans. We don't live in a republic. We're hyphenated Americans, and we live in a democracy. And so the only way that the Democrats are going to win, and which they rely on, is to create classes of victims.
That's right.
Silos of victims. Everybody's a victim. If you looked at Hillary Clinton's or listened to Hillary Clinton's concession speech when she got trounced in New Hampshire by 22 points,
she was a victim.
She was a victim, along with every
victim.
single community, whether it be LGBT, African American, Asian American. I mean, I could hardly keep track of all the victims that she was listing in her concession speech.
I'm a victim. Would you stop it, Megan? I'm going to burst into tears here. Oh, and I didn't even get to the other constituency she has. Hookers for Hillary, now mobilizing in Nevada. We missed that in the whole conversation. I'll give you 20 seconds on hookers for Hillary.
Well, they're just hoping that Bill Clinton is going to make a campaign stop.
Well, yeah, make a contribution.
Big money.
Mm-hmm. Make a deposit. Stop it. You are way out of control.
But I got to tell you, watch Nevada, because her 26-point lead just evaporated. They're within 1 point of each other.
Look for Bernie Sanders, a Democratic Socialist, to win it all. Megan Barth, always a great conversation. ReaganBaby.com. You can find Megan. God bless you. Have a good day.
You too.
Michigan, born and raised with Midwestern values and Michigan common sense.
All right, welcome back to it. Hey, if you'd like to join the conversation, 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966 is the number to call. Here's what we're going to do every day going forward. Ivy suggested this. I thought maybe it's a pretty good idea. Every day here in the third hour, the last section here, the last 8 or 10 minutes, we'll take to sort out the day. What we've covered, where we're going, what might be on your mind. So we'll open the phone lines up. Mike on the line in East Lansing to start things off. Mike, welcome to the program.
Thank you, sir. Great conversation with that young lady. It's I'm getting fed up with all this stuff with Obama, this reparation stuff. Did you see in the news the other day the guy, the NAACP, is giving the governor 30 days to fix the stuff in Flint? Otherwise, Jesse and Al are all going to show up there and protesting, talking about reparations. I've had it.
Reparations for what?
Reparations for the
No, I get it, but I'm saying I'm being serious. Reparations for what? Have you ever owned a slave?
Yes, sir. They were my children. I made them cut my grass when they were growing up as a lesson of responsibility.
You might owe them reparations.
I was accused of being
my point is this. My point is this.
You know what? I'll tell you what. They want reparations. Let's start by subtracting the cost of the Civil War. Let's start by subtracting the cost of all the cities that they burned down when they got their shorts or not because they were treating unfairly. Let's subtract some of the
you're going to be called a racist.
$1 trillion that have spent on Johnson's programs, erase poverty. Or
$20 trillion. The Great Society. The Great Society has cost us in excess of $20 trillion to date. By the way, it's ironically comparable to our national debt.
We'll subtract all that stuff from reparations, and then we'll start collecting from them what we've given them already. I'm tired of this hyphenation. I'm tired of hearing the Muslim Americans and Black Americans, and just you're either going to be an American or you're going to be wherever you want to go. My son got into an argument with a black colleague at work saying he was an African American. He put a map of Africa on a cell phone and shoved it across to him and said, "Show me where you're from." And the guy had no clue. And I think that just sums it up as far as I'm concerned.
Mike, thanks for stopping in. I got to run. I appreciate it. 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. I couldn't agree more with the hyphenated American concerns. That started with Teddy Roosevelt in a speech he did in October of 1915. You should go back and look it up. Hyphenated American. I put it up on my page from time to time, and I reference that speech from time to time here. Hyphenated, either you're American or you're not. And if hyphenated American, under the disguise of diversity, is damaging to us. E pluribus unum, from many come one. One America. Now, do we have our problems? We do, but let me explain something to you. Less than 1%, to reference Mike's comments there. Of the 12 million Africans that were sent to the Western Hemisphere to be slaves, less than 400,000 ever came to the United States. Did you know that? Less than 400,000. A very small percentage. The majority went to Brazil. And Iraq and Iran, had more African slaves than the entire Western Hemisphere combined by several times. This notion that somehow America was this great center of slavery is ridiculous. Now, that's not to discount or downplay the fact that, yes, there were about 400,000 Africans that were brought here against their will. Okay, I get that. But reparations? My family fought in the Civil War for the Michigan 5th, fighting for the Emancipation Proclamation. My family fought to end slavery. The other part of my family wasn't even here on time. So why would I pay reparations when my family fought in the Civil War for the Michigan 5th to end slavery? My family never owned slaves, never participated in the slave trade. So who exactly would pay the reparations? Just white people in general? What about Italian Americans that showed up here after the turn of the 20th century? 50 years or more after the end of slavery. Should they be forced to pay reparations? They're from Italy. What about Germans that came here after World War II? Should they be forced to pay reparations just because they're white? Talk about racism. Well, you're white, you owe money because you're white. You're from Italy and Germany, Denmark and Finland. You owe money. You had nothing to do with race in America or slavery in America. But step up to the pay window because the victim class demands you pay and pay now and pay handsomely. Roger on the hotline in northern Michigan. Roger, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning. Hey, I've got a thing here with the millennials going on in this country. They're following a person that they get a paycheck till he was 40 years old, Bernie Sanders. And as far as I'm concerned, he is a deadbeat communist. And you got these young people that have been educated in these colleges where the Marxist professors infiltrated our nation and have led them down this road. This is nothing but a revision of the Bolsheviks in 1917 Russia. I have some friends in downstate that are from Lithuania. Their grandparents were into that, what happened to them in Russia. They lost their farm. They were sent to Siberia for 15 years. They came back. They had no farm. Their house was destroyed. They gave them a cow, a pig, chickens, and some ducks and said, we'll be back to get our collective money that you owe us.
You know what's interesting?
Raising. That's what's going to happen to these young people. None of them. They're going to college. They haven't held a good, steady job for 10 years yet.
They've never held a job, paid a mortgage, raised children, done anything. Roger, thanks for checking in.
That's right.
Thanks for checking in.
Wake up, you young people. Get the diapers off and get out there and get a job.
There you go. That's Roger from
Northern Michigan. I'm tired of it. They're going to ruin this nation by a guy that has no credibility whatsoever.
It's Wednesday on the program. Be sure to join us tomorrow, Roger. I greatly appreciate that. We'll talk more about this tomorrow. Check it out at the Steve Gruber Show Facebook page. Have a great Wednesday.